Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, I've come to a garden center in my home city of Raleigh, North Carolina. This is Homewood Nursery and Garden Center. It's in the northern part of Raleigh in a kind of a hilly, wooded area near Falls Lake. Really beautiful up here. I got my start in a garden center in North Raleigh, close to here, called Rake and Hoe. It's no longer here, but it was like the main competitor for Homewood, where I'm at now. And I've always loved this garden center. Just because of this, part of it's just because of the surroundings that it's in, makes it quite beautiful. They grow a lot of their own annuals. They grow poinsettias at Christmas time, and then they have just beautiful nursery stock, and of course all the other things you'd expect to find at a garden center, gifts and that kind of thing. But I've come here to do a video on plant shopping. I figured I'd come to a really nice garden center to show you a really nice selection of plants and how I go about determining whether something is, healthy in a garden center space or a nursery space when I'm shopping for it. And so let's get started walking around. So part of what I'm looking for when I'm shopping for plants is, are the plants kind of seasonally correct? Meaning that right now is the middle of March, and in my area, we won't have a tremendous amount of new growth on things, until sometime in the middle of April. So as I'm looking at these vines, this climbing hydrangea here doesn't have leaves. Well, it's not supposed to have leaves. It's the middle of March. This star jasmine or Confederate jasmine has some of its purple winter color on it right here. See the leaves have that some winter color on them. Completely and totally normal. I wouldn't want a tremendous amount of new growth on this evergreen vine here in mid-March, but if it was mid-April or mid-May, I'd expect the thing to be growing, and they even bloom about that time. This particular vine does. So, again, I just want it to be kind of seasonally correct. I don't want a tremendous amount of new growth, before that time in the late winter and early spring here. So let's talk trees real quickly. There's a lot of container trees to choose from up here. I'm in the Japanese maple section right here, and on Japanese maples are going to be grafted, meaning that the bottom of the tree is going to be a different variety, so that they can, these weeping maples are grafted onto the top of it. So I'm going to look at this graft, where the graft is, and this is a really nice graft on this Japanese maple. Right here is another example. This is where the graft was made, and it just looks fantastic. There's just no issues with that graft whatsoever. Japanese maples are not inexpensive, and so making sure that graft looks good. And I'll give you a couple other examples of that. So most hybrid dogwoods or pink or red dogwoods are going to be grafted. Of course, they haven't leafed out yet. There's the graft on the bottom of this one, which looks fantastic. So let me show you a few other things I look for on trees other than the grafts. This is a Galaxy Magnolia, and one more time I'll show you a really nice graft, and I don't see any growth coming from below that graft, because this is a different tree down here than the Galaxy Magnolia that's attached to it above that spot. But the other thing I'm looking for when I'm purchasing trees is that they're just well branched up at the top, but not overly compact. I don't want to see lots and lots of branches really close together up in the top of the tree. And I'll show you right here, this Japanese snowbell is a great example of one that's just been pruned really well. It's a grafted variety. Graft looks great down at the bottom. Trunk is nice and straight. And then the branches up here, there's 3 or 4 lower branches here. And then there's space between them, going up. Okay, and then there's not, the branches that were, the branches on the outside have been kept. The branches that were heading back toward the center of the trunk have been removed. So whoever was, had this tree, was growing this tree, did a great job with that. You'll continue to get pieces like this, on the upper part of this branch that are heading back toward the center of the plant. I hope you can see that well, that I'll clean up in the future. But really nice top, really nice growth habit on the top of that Japanese snowbell. This is a thundercloud plum, purple leaf plum that I had at the old house. Again, it has really nice branching structure through here, but it does have a few pieces like this right here that are heading back toward the center, and you can see where that's going to be an issue. Rubbing up in here. Again, I'm just going to take that off when I get it to the house, but overall, really nice structure on the top of this tree. Here's another example of what I'm talking about here. I want to take that branch right there off that's crossed back into the center, into the center of the tree. I want to keep good air movement in the center of the tree, and I don't want crossing branches, and they're easy to get off when the trees are this small, but overall, perfect tree really. They have a really nice collection of conifers here. When I'm purchasing conifers, I kind of want them pretty much perfect when I buy them. I don't want to have my conifers be a recovery project. You know, if they're thin down in the bottom, which none of these are, they look great. But if you see a lot of browning down in the bottom, it's usually not that big of a deal. It's probably a plant that got a little tired of being in that container and maybe underwatered at some point, and they'll thin out down at the bottom a bit, and that's fine with leafy plants, and I'll show you that in a minute. But with conifers, it just takes so long to recover. So I'm kind of going to be really picky initially that my conifers I'm buying are in good shape, and all of these are. They all look fantastic. All kinds of things here. This golden hinoki fault cypress right here is just absolutely beautiful, and again, it's full down to the bottom. A few more conifers to look at. These gold mops look great. All of these little dwarf cryptomeria or dwarf Japanese cedars look great. Some arborvitaes right here that just look, just fantastic. I mean, right down to the bottom. Again, that's what I'm looking for on here. There's some blue atlas cedars here that have been contorted, and again, just across the board, all the conifers that I see here, I would carry home, if they were on my list. There's some variegated American boxwoods here, Green Mountain boxwoods. I've just come to the boxwood area. The other leafy evergreens that I would probably avoid buying if they didn't look great, which all of these do, would be slow growing ones. Boxwoods would be an example of that, but this is a variegated American boxwood. I created a topiary out of one of these recently, if you want to go back and look at that video. But they're perfect. They're full to the bottom. They've been pruned nicely into whatever shapes people are trying to buy them at, to buy them as, and just look great. But boxwoods would be super slow to recover. So again, I definitely want healthy, full, boxwoods. Hollies would be a different story. If a holly didn't, look absolutely perfect the day I bought it, they grow much quicker, they recover much quicker. But boxwoods are not going to be forgiving that way. One thing I would encourage you to do is look past the flowers. This is Temple Bell's Pieris right here. This is a beautiful, beautiful flowering shrub. I've got mountain snow in my yard blooming right now. They look fantastic. But again, without flowers on it, what are these plants going to look like? These happen to be absolutely perfect specimens. They're just going to be perfect little green balls after they finish flowering. It's easy to get caught up in what the flowers look like today and ignore, kind of what's under them. So look past that. So here's another example of seasonally correct plants. Here's a group of azaleas. The flower buds are on them. They're ready to fire off. It's middle March now. These will be flowering by probably the 1st of April, maybe, or certainly by mid-April. They still have their winter color on them because it hasn't warmed up enough. So they're just seasonally correct. With what's going on outside. If I was buying them in full flower today, a month before my last frost date, there'd definitely be a possibility that they would end up, with the flowers burned off of them, or if they had completely woken back up and already put on a ton of new growth, they could be damaged by frost as well. I like that they have lots of their ground cover items in smaller containers. I think you can save a lot of money. These are going to be fast growing things. Most of the things on this table are shade ground covers, but it's kind of nice to be able to save a little money on these things when you have to, when you're doing ground covers. A lot of times you're planting lots of pieces. So let's talk about leafy evergreens like these gardenias for a minute, and things that would concern me when I'm buying them. Yellow leaves down at the bottom of the plant doesn't concern me at all. You see that yellow leaf right there on this gardenia? It's completely normal in the late winter, early spring. These things start to think about putting on some new growth. They're going to flower later in the spring, and they're going to sacrifice a few leaves down at the bottom of it potentially during that time. It just doesn't concern me at all. I'm more concerned with yellow growth on the top of the plant. A lot of times that can indicate that the plant's actually been overwatered, and I don't see any of that on these gardenias. I don't have an example of that to give you this morning, but yellow new growth is a concern for me when I'm shopping for leafy evergreen plants. So again, on leafy evergreens, I expect in the spring they're going to shed a few leaves down at the bottom in order to flower. Don't want to see that yellow growth on the top. One other thing I'm looking for, and I'm not going to find it here at a really nice garden center, is if I see a plant that's wilting. Let's say this Alyssium, you know, the branch was kind of pointing down like that a little bit, and it was clearly in a wilt, like it needed water. But I go down here to the container and feel it, and it's actually wet or it's heavy, but it's in a wilt. Usually that's an indicator of root rot. And I have seen, you know, been to places where they're selling plants that they had overwatered and started to rot the roots. And the plant is actually dry, but the roots have been damaged and it can't bring any water up to the top. So it is in a wilt, but it can't be fixed because it has root rot. That's a plant I definitely want to avoid. So I'm not worried about something that's in a wilt that's dry, that's just dry though, because that's just normal. They're busy during the day, and they'll get to the watering later. But if it's in a wilt and it's wet, definitely avoid that plant. So I'm in the camellia section. All the camellia sasanquas are there, the fall blooming camellias, which have some flowers this spring because it got kind of cool and stayed cool through the winter. So they still have a few flower buds on them. And then the camellia japonicas are here, which are blooming now, this is the time that they bloom in my area in zone 7B. Nice thing here at Homewood is they have these handouts right here in the camellia section. They have a camellia care and culture handout that you can take out of here if you're purchasing a camellia, and they have these all around the shopping area. One more thing I'll talk about on plant shopping is root-bound plants. Plants that have been in the container for a very long period of time, and when you pull them out, the roots are just matted down together. They've circled inside the container a ton. Really, that doesn't bother me all that much, but you know, because I'm pretty aggressive breaking up the roots. I don't think you're going to come to a place like Homewood here that's, you know, I'm here on a Friday morning and the place is just absolutely full of people. I don't think you're going to come up here and see, you know, a lot of seriously root-bound material. But if there is something, you know, a holly that's been here for longer, which this one hasn't, I'm just saying. And you know, they have this stuff sitting on the pine straw and gravel here. It's possible that the thing could be just locked down to the ground because the roots have come out of the bottom of it. It doesn't bother me all that much. It just never has. What I do know though is frequently when you do damage to the roots, either breaking it free from the ground, let's say if it had rooted in there, or when you pull it out of the pot and you've got to break the roots up to get them growing outward, it can have a little bit of a negative impact on the top of the plant because there just won't be as many roots available for the amount of growth that's on the top of it. So there may be a little bit of pruning that needs to be done on the top of the plant to compensate for the damage that you're doing to the roots. But again, it's just not something that concerns me all that much. So those are some of the things that I'm looking for when I'm shopping for plants. I think really seasonally correct is very important to me, meaning I don't want something that was forced into flower 2 months ahead of time so that it was appealing to me when I went to shop for it. I can tell most of the things that are in this garden center here were probably purchased not that far away or grown not that far away from here because, you know, they haven't all flushed out a month early. They're not all in full bloom a month early, that kind of thing. A lot of the things that concern customers when I was selling retail plants, you know, old chewed up leaves down near the bottom of the plant, which I can't find, you know, examples of that because they're purchasing from some of the best nurseries in the country here. But if you have old chewed up leaves on the oldest growth on the plant, but there's none of that on the new growth, don't worry about that. That was old insect damage of some kind. You know, if the insect damage is up in the top 5 or 6 inches, or you can look on the back of the leaves and find insects on the newest growth, that's a plant you don't want to purchase. But the, you know, damage on the oldest growth on the plant could have been a year ago, and it's just not that big of a deal. And again, conifers, you know, which, you know, back here behind me here, I kind of want to be picky with those. I want to make sure that I'm not waiting for a conifer to recover. Leafy evergreen shrubs or deciduous leafy shrubs, if they're not perfect the day you're buying them, it's just not that big of a deal, honestly. So thank you very much for watching these videos. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell notification so you know when I upload a video. Thanks for watching.